Okay, thanks, Alice. Good to have so many people here to hear about employment and what good employment support will look like. And I'm just going to give an overview of what we think are the key things and the key elements of good employment support. Just to say a reminder about the reforms. Alice has mentioned the reforms, and we're in the 7th year of the reforms now. And it's very much just to say that a reminder about the old system didn't work. And they didn't lead to good outcomes for young people. And what the reforms are about is improving life outcomes. The Code of Practice reminds us we have to start from much earlier to think about raising aspirations and the expectations of children and young people with learning disabilities, and have that focus on preparing for adulthood outcomes that Alice already mentioned. And really to help people see that getting a job is possible and the good thing. So there's some national initiatives that are actually helping us support people into employment, and Alice has mentioned the Department for Education and the work that we're doing with them around supported internships and traineeships and apprenticeships. They've given some employment grants in the last 5 years to help develop employment opportunities and to train staff. And one of the things that has really been a big influence in the Department for Education is they hosted a supported internship about 2 years ago, and now that has led to them changing policy around offering supported internships within the civil service. We're liaising with the Department for Work and Pensions, and we have a lot of Department for Work and Pensions colleagues on the call today, and they're looking at how we can improve the access to work approach and to make sure it's available for job coaching and employment support and for reasonable adjustments that are needed within the workplace. There's a lot of initiatives going on around NHS England who are committed to offering more opportunities for people with learning disabilities and autism. And they've created, they're targeting supported internship opportunities through their 5-year plan and their 10-year plan. And they're also developing the number of NHS internships and employment programmes through Project Search and Project Choice. And I think we have Lily Bayer on the call today, who's working on the Project Search work within the NHS. And the aim is that they will have, in the first 5 years, at least half of those internships converted into paid employment. So I think most of you will have seen this graphic, and it represents what young people and their families want to have for them in adulthood. And as Alice said, that's having employment and being as independent as possible and being part of their community and having friends and relationships and staying as healthy as possible. The challenge is for us to work together to help them achieve these outcomes. And they're all intrinsically linked, but I think employment actually is at the core. So why is it worth it? I think this sums it up really well. It gives people purpose, it allows them to make choices, it helps them develop social networks, it improves mental health and physical health, and it gives people a status within their community. So what works to help us have good support for employment? Well, we have to start with the presumption of employability, and we have to work with families and to raise aspirations, but we also have to meet those aspirations with high quality provision. It's about having a good vocational curriculum and meaningful work experience, which is outside the school or college setting. Excuse me. And it helps to hear from other young people about what their jobs are, and then having good employment support available. Good employment support requires good planning, and the initial planning that actually is needed to help you search for the right job for a person and match their skills and interests to that job. It helps to develop relationships with employers, and job coaches need to be available to support young people in the workplace, and they need to be well-trained job coaches, and systematic instruction is at the centre of that. We need job coaches to understand what working interviews are, and that a workplace mentor is definitely a good thing for a young person going into employment. And we need to be able to have ongoing support and mentoring when a young person is placed in an employment setting. So there are benefits for employers too when we have good employment support. It allows simplified processes in the workplace, which benefits everyone. It improves the reputation of an employer and an organisation, both internally and externally. And I think this graphic on the side really says, states things for me. It shouldn't be about corporate social responsibility. It should just be about taking a common sense approach to employing people. It also leads to lots of innovation for an employer when people suggest different ways of working, and it leads to a wider pool of labour that reflects local communities. It also reduces staff turnover, and there's been some really good research done on that by Steve Bayer. This is what happens when you get good employment support and good planning. This is a case study about a young woman who, through the course of COVID, has actually been able to access a job, and through reasonable adjustments and using Zoom interviews, she was able to have her questions given to her the day before her interview to allow her to plan her responses. And you can look at this case study on our website. It really helps to have that good employment support available. So in summary, we're going to hear today about how other people are doing good employment support, and about how we start talking about employment from much earlier, and looking at employing disabled workers carries business benefits for employers, and also thinking about those reasonable adjustments. Small changes benefit all employees, and those small changes usually make the most difference. But we definitely have to start off thinking about employability from the earliest years, and know that everyone can work if we just figure out how to support them. I think I've done it, Alice, within the time. These are just some of our resources which we can share at the end of the session. This is about work experience, and then a routes into work guide. I'll stop sharing there, Alice.
Thank you, Ellen. So a really quite whistle stop, but actually really important fundamental start to our discussions today. And I think it's just worth mentioning as well that many of you may have seen the Ofsted report, Send Old Issues, New Issues, Next Steps, that came out on the 16th of June, where it was a useful appraisal, if you like, of where the Send inspections have got to, the Send and CQC inspections. And there's no doubt that while there seems to be a lot more opportunities, which are stated in the report, for further education, supported employment and training for young people with SEND in many areas across the country, and I know a lot of people on this call are going to be already very committed to that work and really involved in developing new ways for young people to approach training for employment. There's still only a very small minority of young people with SEND who end up in sustained employment. So our purpose really today is to help encourage you with ideas and information from other areas, but indeed as well to share discussion in the groups. I forgot to mention the chat. Please do use the chat to ask questions, because we are quite a large group today. We will be making sure that presentations are shared, and the resources certainly that Ellen's referred to are on the Preparing for Adulthood website, but please use the chat. It's a really useful way for us to encourage networking. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tracy Manley, who's an employment officer in Lincolnshire. Tracy, can you turn your camera on?
Yes, hi guys.
Hi. So Tracy, thanks to Ellen's speedy presentation, you've got plenty of time to go through your presentation. I'll just give you a sort of 1 minute warning towards the end, if that's all right with you. Thank you.
Brilliant. We'll share it. Can you all see the presentation okay?
Yeah, it's come up.
So I'm just going to go quickly through what YPLP is. So my name's Tracy, I'm an employment officer for YPLP, and I cover Grantham and Ruskington area, but as a service we run all across Lincolnshire. So we work with young people and offer alternative education for those who are 16 to 19, up to 24 if you have an EHC, and we like to empower, give them high aspirations. We have high aspirations of them, embed that in them and support them to achieve their full potential. They're all the sites we've got. This is just a quick whistle stop tour, guys. You'll get the whole thing. The programs we offer, we do pathways to independence, pathways to employment, supported internships and traineeships. We do your basic maths English qualifications and lots of other vocational qualifications, with a high degree of our focus on preparing for adulthood. We run lots of different qualifications as well, all work-based obviously. and we're all the employment team have got advice and guidance at level 3 minimum. So work experience, which is the area I am covering. I do apologise, I've got a person that's just jumped up. Work experience is an integral part of our programme. It's from all our learners know from the very beginning that work experience is going to be part of their programme in one shape or another. It may be initially to do with just work projects, and then they'll go on to work experience as soon as they're ready. The employment team as such, our job role has changed a lot through COVID actually. We now do a lot of Zoom sessions. So what we used to do in the classroom base was go in and support learners to identify their personal skills, CVs, qualities, do some group projects and teamwork. We've not been able to do that this year. So we've gone to online sessions. So they work with myself and Mary at Grantham, and we deliver all of that advice, either in small groups, large groups, or one-to-one. We do employer visits as and when we can. Again, COVID restrictions have made this a little challenging this year. We arrange mock interviews. The DW have helped us a lot with that this year. And we plan and prepare group projects. Again, COVID made that really difficult. So we did a different kind of project this year. We wrote to local residential care homes to try and get like a pen pal service going with the learners, and that worked really well to support our learners to identify their skills and their hobbies and interests that they hadn't told us about. So it's quite nice because they in their eyes they were writing to an old person, so they were quite open. It was really quite a good project. The role of a job coach. So we do supporting sessions. We like to get to know our learners before we take them out on any kind of work experience, and we do that by going into their maths and English sessions and PfA sessions. We do that for a good couple of weeks to understand them, to understand their coping strategies, to understand their triggers, their personalities, what they like, what they dislike, and how best to support them. We offer careers advice and guidance within the first 2 or 3 weeks, and we review that on a 12-weekly basis, one-to-one with that individual. Mary and myself do vocational profiling, which you'll hear about a little bit later on. We understand and research different adaptations for employment, run health and safety, training by systematic instruction. If anybody's not done that training, it's the best training we've ever done. It's absolutely brilliant. Job matching, job carving, so we try and match learners with job roles. A lot of our learners come in with an idea of what they want to do, but when they actually understand what the role involves, they change their mind quite a lot. So we don't focus on one area of job. We try and encourage them to do lots of different work experience elements and lots of different work experience placements to get a more overview of employment in general and work expectations. We review all placements every 6 weeks, whether we're job coaching or not. They're reviewed every 6 weeks. Employment support is offered to understand both individuals' needs. Mary and myself, where permitted, we go out and we learn the role in advance before taking the learners there, so that we know how to support them, and that works well with the teaching systematic instruction. Reasonable adjustments, we make as many reasonable adjustments as we possibly can to support that learner to have the best experience possible. We do travel training across the county. We do transport support, that me and Mary transporting them to and from placements. We support with benefits, making sure doing some better off calculations and stuff about when they transition into employment, and there's the access to work service that we use. The employment team as a whole for YPLP, we all are trained in teaching systematic instruction. We're all trained in first aid. We do breakaway training, autism training. We're all safeguard trained. We're all trained in vocational profiling, and the employment officers are all trained in benefits, and that's updated every year. All of the training is updated yearly, except the systematic instructions. We all meet together every month, which is really quite nice actually, because pre-COVID, although we were one big YPLP team, we kind of stuck to our own little pockets of the county. But throughout COVID, we've actually become more of a united team. So we're forever on teams to each other, how things are working in one area, seeing if it'll work better see if that'll work in our area for us, or giving advice to each other. That's really worked well from COVID, from an employment team point of view. COVID. So COVID's had a massive impact on our job roles. It a lot of employers won't have us because of social distancing rules, because they can't have more than one person, one or two people in an office, and we are an extra body. So there's been lots of placements that have been put on hold or ended because of social distances. Some businesses we've worked with in the past have unfortunately closed. Furlough. In the Grantham area specifically, we can't get anybody into a placement if their staff are on furlough. They're very reluctant to take anybody on work experience with their staff being on the furlough scheme. Different lockdowns obviously have their impact. There's not enough work for the people that are on placement at the moment. So we used to work, for example, there was a cafe we worked in. We had a young learner in there who was doing a fantastic job, to the point where they were going to gain paid employment. Lockdown happened, they reduced their staffing and changed their business model. So it just went to a delivery, like they just made food and delivered it, so they didn't need anybody to support with that. And due to social distancing, they weren't allowed any other bodies on the site as well. There's a high demand for paid roles at the minute. Work experience, employers are withdrawing placements. It's happening, unfortunately, it's happening quite a lot where we are at the moment. Again, it's all to do with COVID. And our learners' anxiety in general has heightened. The fear of going back into a work placement, or the fear of getting on a bus or being in public, or having to wear a mask, or following the latest COVID guidelines, and not understanding the COVID guidelines very clearly. And then on the flip side of that, we've withdrawn 2 placements because the employers are not following the COVID guidelines to our liking. So we wouldn't want to keep our learners in somewhere that they potentially get poorly. On the positive, I'm going to tell you about Gemma. So Gemma's one of our really good success stories of this year. We've only had 8 learners that have transitioned into 2 paid employment this year, and 3 that have gone on to long-term volunteer projects or placements. But Gemma is a bit of a very positive story for us. So she started by PRP with us in August last year. She started at 16. She came from a pupil referral unit, so she hadn't been in mainstream school. She really struggles with change. She has autism, and she really struggled initially. She really struggled initially with YPRP. She did lots of phoning mum to take her home, lots of not staying in the classroom, for all sorts of different reasons. One of them was her chair was changed. Her chair was a different colour, so she wouldn't sit on it. So at the very beginning, Gemma really struggled with YPRP. By October, she started with us in August. By October, she'd started to settle, and we took her for a work experience placement because she didn't really know what she wanted to do. She knew she wanted to work. She knew she wanted to work with children or adults, but she wasn't actually sure. So when the first lockdown eased in October, we were able to take her to a charity shop just to do some customer service skills. We got there, pre-planned the interview, pre-prepped the employer and Gemma as to what was going to happen. It was a working interview, not a sit-down interview, because Gemma didn't want to sit down interview. She wanted just to go in there, learn a little bit of the role, and then decide from there. When we got there, the lady wasn't very polite, and it was a really negative experience for Gemma, so that was cancelled. However, on the way home from there, there is a nursing home near where Gemma lives, and she says, can we try somewhere like that? So we did. We phoned them, and the manager there, Jill, she was very interested in working with us. She was very interested in giving Gemma an opportunity, and she was very upfront from the very beginning to say that Gemma was 16, she wouldn't turn 17 in June, and she wouldn't be able to offer her a paid job until she was 17 3/4 because of the personal care element of the role. So with Gemma, so I've given you the overview here anyways. So sorry, I've talked through that, I do apologise. With Gemma, we did lots of stuff in advance. So we did her vocational profile, we understood Gemma's skills and qualities, and we did a career map with her on a one-to-one basis as to where she could go in a nursery, where she could go in the care home. We did lots of research about the care home, and I'd already spoken to the manager by this point, and she'd given us some information about the care home, and we did a lot of research about dementia, because that's one of the elements that is in the care home. We contacted the placement, arranged a meeting with the employer. before this, I spoke to Gemma and her mum and made sure I was allowed to give the information, give the employer the information about Gemma on her needs, which was done. We understood the position, the role that was available. I went to go and meet Jill to actually learn that role, to see what it was. We set up an interview at that point. The interview adjustments for Gemma was that we had an overview of what the interview process would be. Gemma didn't want the questions. She just wanted how the interview would be held, who would be there, who would be in the room. She just wanted to know those things. She was quite happy to have her questions on the day. Mary, my job coach, set up a mock interview, and it was structured exactly the same way as what the employer had given us the information for. Gemma was supported to the interview. We parked outside the care home 30 minutes before the interview to do our COVID test, which was all pre-arranged in advance because Gemma didn't want to take it inside the care home because that would have heightened her anxiety levels. And then the potential of her staying for that interview would have reduced dramatically. When Gemma was offered the job, she was fully job coached, so we went with her. We initially worked with the activities coordinator because it was the role within the care home that was less demanding. So we worked there with Gemma. The lady who runs the activities section for the care home, her son's also got autism, so she had a great understanding of what Gemma might need. So that was fantastic. We expected to job coach Gemma for about 3 to 6 months. We actually only job coached her for 2 months. It was incredible how she just slotted in. She fitted in perfectly. We identified suitable mentors within the first couple of weeks. Gemma was Mary, the job coach, and I worked alongside the mentors to support them on how to support Gemma, with Gemma's consent, obviously. And then we withdrew. So the first 4 weeks she was fully job coached, and the following 4 weeks the job coach would sit in a different room for 10 minutes throughout one session, go back, make sure she was all right, then go away for another 20 minutes, but be in the home at all points where Gemma knew she was. So if she needed her, she could go and get her, and that was agreed from the very beginning. The job throughout Gemma's placement, we've been in regular contact with Jill, and we did lots of work around supporting the carers to understand Gemma's needs, because Gemma comes across, she's high functional autistic, so she comes across as she needs no support at times. But if you throw a curveball in there and change her routine for the day, or change who she's working with without her knowing in advance, she only needs to know 10-15 minutes in advance, but if you just throw it on her, it will absolutely heighten her anxiety, and she won't be able to process the rest of the day. She'll just end up going home. So the employer was phenomenal. All the staff were trained all the staff were aware of autism anyway because of the dementia training they did. Jill put on we did autism training with the manager and the mentors, and then the rest of the staff since then are all going on an autism awareness course at the end of July, which is fantastic. The reasonable adjustments that were made for Gemma specifically were the fact that she knew the interview structure in advance, the job coach that attended the interview with Gemma, COVID tests were completed in the car park. That happened for about 5 or 6 weeks until 5 or 6 times until Gemma was absolutely happy about going into the care home to do the COVID test in the care home. They had to be done in the car park because they were COVID tests from the home, and to meet their regulations, they needed to be done on site. But the car park was a good reasonable adjustment. Gemma has a problem with food, so she likes to eat away from other people. So she's been designated 2 different areas just in case there's somebody in the area that Gemma goes to go and have a lunch in. The structure of the care home, they usually go for lunch one by one anyway. It's not as if they don't have lunch together as a whole team, so that works really well for Gemma. But she's got 2 designated areas where she can go for lunch. Job coach, the care home were really, really good actually. So Gemma did some dementia training with which was delivered by an outside company within the home. The job coach went with Gemma to the training, but actually didn't go into the room. She sat in the room next to where the training was being held, just in case she was needed by Gemma. But actually Gemma did an amazing job all by herself. She was fully engaged in that training as well. It's fantastic. Plan set days and times for working initially, so Gemma knew exactly where she was going, where she had to be, who she was meeting. She was given a uniform to make her feel part of the team pretty quickly. All those little things were put in place to start to help her. And we made sure that she was working with more than one person, because she may get attachment issues with working with one person. So from the very beginning, we made sure there was 3 different mentors, so there wasn't just the one. Our fear was Gemma may get attached to one person and then not work unless that one person was there. Gemma gets changed in the side room, so because it's a care home, Gemma has to go in outdoor clothes and get changed on site. So Gemma wears her uniform under her outdoor clothes and gets changed in the side room. Care staff members escort Gemma to her mentor. So when she goes in the morning, she goes straight to the office, and the lady called Anna in there will take her to wherever that her mentor is. So Gemma hasn't got to worry about going around the building. Over the last 2 weeks, however, Gemma has just gone in herself, and the lady in the office, Anna, has just said Zara's in the upstairs room or wherever, and Gemma's just taken herself there, which is fantastic. And she's completed some online training at YPLP, so it's training to do with the care home, but she's supported at YPLP to complete it. She's done 21 different units so far, quite a lot. Have anybody got any questions? I'll quickly share with you Gemma's case study, but we can put that on the line online afterwards, I believe, can't we?
Yeah, we will make sure that her case study is shared. Really fantastic, actually, to hear about just how responsive you and your colleagues were to not only making a personalised programme for Gemma and really professionally approaching her work experience, but also being so responsive and flexible. I think that's one of the things we often talk about when we're delivering training on preparing for adulthood is that attitudinal approach. It's all very well knowing the law, but actually when it comes to designing things and making reasonable adjustments for people, it's very important to be iterative, I suppose, and what you've described is really a fantastic case study. Thank you so much for that. I've asked people to put questions in the chat simply to be able to manage the amount of people. We've got a lot of good feedback coming about that case study. Thank you, Tracy. There is one question here about the age groups. Do you provide this work experience offer for what's the age groups that you work for, and is it part of the learning offer, or can it be for neat young people who aren't there?
No, it's only the support we give only for people at YPLP that attend YPLP, but we offer from 16 to 24 if you've got an EHC, or 16 to 19 without an EHC. But we are very inclusive. Well, anybody in the county, please come and have a look, see what we are. We haven't got a cohort of learners. We'll take on anybody throughout the county and give them a chance.
Great. And is it a charity that you work for, YPLP?
No, it's run by Lincolnshire County Council. Great.
And another question here was just the criteria for the project. How are young people referred in?
So they're referred, we're a very quiet little thing that people don't really know about until you know somebody that's been with us. We found that over the last couple of years. So we are self-referral. We sometimes get referrals from youth offending, social workers, like that kind of stuff. But colleges are starting to refer into us now, and so are secondary schools. So we've been doing a lot of promotion about who we are and where we are.
Fantastic. What I'll do is just make sure we get a link to your organisation.
Kate Capella's just informed me that it's funded through the ESFA, even though it's Lincolnshire County, but it's part of Lincolnshire County, but it's self-funded.
Okay, and we'll make sure that a link goes up in the chat so that people. Oh, there we are. Thank you. To your organisation. Thank you very much. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right. Well, just to sort of refresh people who might have arrived while we were doing that presentation, we've got a lot of people on the call today, and our focus is on employment, and we have representation from local authorities, education providers, charities and voluntary sector organisations, health, social care, and we've got several colleagues today from the Department of Work and Pensions, and indeed from Project Search. So we've got a really good collection of people, and we will be going into breakout rooms after our presentations a bit later on. But now I'd just like to introduce Sami Zafir from Wakefield, local authority, who's kindly offered to come and do a presentation with more update really on the work that they're doing to get young people into employment, and some suggestions around employee networks and forums, which is something that we've talked about a bit together. Hi, Sami.
Hi. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. My name's Sami Zafir, and I'm the supported internship and preparing for adulthood coordinator for Wakefield Council. So I joined Wakefield Council last August, and even though I've predominantly worked from home, I have managed to develop some great relationships with many of the stakeholders that work with our young people. We invest heavily in children and young people's education from a really young age, in particular element 3, to enable them to become successful learners, independent in their own right, and ultimately becoming productive citizens. This said, young people with SEND actually face complex barriers, as you know. There's multiple challenges, including being limited to generic offers that are not always suitable, and subsequently they have very few opportunities in the future. There is a need to establish pathways that not only supplement learning, but are unique in their approach and specifically tailored to meet young people with SEN needs, whilst always supporting their aspirations to secure paid work. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So, one of the key things we've done in Wakefield is set up the Preparing for Adulthood Forum. It's bringing together key stakeholders to develop and agree an action plan for embedding the SEN reforms relating to PfA. Core membership includes senior colleagues such as the NHS Commissioning and Planning Manager, Head of Service in Adult Social Care, the Complex Care Needs Lead and Manager, Heads of the Secondary Special Schools, Heads of Inclusion from the mainstream colleges, Virtual School, training providers and our employment hub colleagues, our local offer representative, parents, and our independent college, Camphill, and so on. The meetings are held up to 4 times a year with key actions for all involved. We've already identified and developed proposals which facilitate strategic commissioning across education, health and social care, including service design and delivery that meets the local authority's objectives. One such example is the commissioning of Brain in Hand, which I'll touch upon in one of the slides. But what the forum has done is it's provided an opportunity to foster relationships between the local authority, schools, colleges and partners involved in shaping pathways for young people with SEND needs. It also supports to oversee elements of the SEND strategy, the SEF and action plan relating to PfA. The core members are working together to make sure that young people with SEND have equal life chances as they move into adulthood with opportunities for paid employment, independence and housing, taking part in their communities, friends and relationships, and planning for good health. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So, supported internships. For those of you that don't know, a supported internship is a 1-year full-time, 5 days per week program based within an organisation. The program is based primarily at an employer's premises. It's intended to enable young people to achieve sustainable paid employment by equipping them with the skills they need for work through learning in the workplace. In Wakefield, we currently have 2 project search programs, now in the 5th year, that are led by Wakefield College, and the business hosts are Next and the Mid Yorkshire Hospital NHS Trust. We also have a new supported internship piloting and due to commence this September with 8 young people through Prospects, the Shaw Trust. We have evidence And the reason this has come about is because we have evidence where young people have been quite forthcoming and not wanting to work at either next door or the hospital. So what we've done is put together a bespoke internship such as this that will provide varied roles to meet the aspirations of a much bigger group of students and work with quite closely with local businesses to hopefully move more young people into paid work. But the objective for each young person is competitive employment. The internship programs provide real life work experience combined with training in employability and independent living skills to help young people make successful transitions to a productive adult life. Next slide, please. Okay, so as an authority, we have to lead by example, and therefore what we are doing is setting up a number of opportunities for our learners. Firstly, we have created, in conjunction with our street scene department, a ring-fenced 2-year SEND apprenticeship within the local authority. A young man with severe learning difficulties who has aspirations to work and doesn't mind getting his hands dirty, his words, not mine, has been offered this paid apprenticeship where he will actually be supporting the teams to look after the parks in our district. And as you can imagine, this will also involve many different projects, including bedding flowers, undertaking the ground maintenance, and so on. Together with our HR department, we've produced a booklet for all internal managers to promote the various programmes on offer for young people seeking careers within the council, including supported internships, work experience placements, apprenticeships, for not only SEND learners but care leavers also. We wanted all the managers to actually engage with us, so we've asked for a link for the booklet to be included within the corporate induction, as well as the refresher training for managers. So the initiative will be seen by those responsible for recruiting all new staff. We have also set up work experience opportunities within our own SEND department, with young people engaging with children to support strategic decisions and short breaks planning. So it's not just a tokenistic gesture. These young people are actually actively involved in key decision making. We're also in the process of a proposal for a supported internship within our own SEND department, with young people engaging with children. Sorry, I've just done that bit. Apologies. So we're in the process of a proposal for a supported internship for a participation officer, gaining children and young people's voices from across the district. Another initiative is that we've got a really good relationship with, and this is because we've got a good relationship with our special schools. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to secure council on-site work experience opportunities for learners with much more complex needs that may not always completely be offered the same opportunities, but they are actually heavily dependent on others for their care. So it's really important that they're offered opportunities just like their peers. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so this is something we've put together for a young man who has some challenging needs and who struggles with classroom-based learning. However, he has huge aspirations around working in horticulture. He's currently a Year 14 student and would have naturally transitioned to day opportunities through a social care budget. His practical skill set and motivation to work in the grounds of the special school had been recognised and generated lots of discussions through his annual review. So a bespoke offer has been created specifically for him. So practical placements will actually take place within the special school grounds, and a further placement at a garden centre or equivalent to continue to develop a real valuable skill set. The young person will be able to build in different horticultural elements of the units and gain an accredited qualification by the end of the programme, and subsequently the school are already looking at creating a full-time 27-hour post for them to apply for when the programme's completed. But this bespoke internship actually will provide meaningful activity in a well-known, established, and therefore less stressful environment. Okay, so next slide, please. So youth hub work. Wakefield Council is actually developing 3 youth support hubs across the district that I'm heavily involved in. What they will be doing is provide support services for all children and young people up until the age of 25. Hopefully, you know, this is something that's going to provide lots of opportunities and services for all young people within the district. But the youth hubs will actually respond to the concerns identified by the young people and will work towards a number of cross-cutting priorities outlined in the local authorities' strategic plans. From a SEND perspective, we will, as in our teams, will have a physical presence every second Tuesday of the month where young people and their parents can drop in and discuss pathways, careers, information on targeted and universal services, referral support to say SENDIAS or social care and health services, as well as support around education, health and care plans through our SEN teams. What it will do is enable further opportunity to develop relationships and link in with young people and help prevent them becoming need. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Thank you. So, and finally, as mentioned previously, we work really, really closely with our NHS clinical commissioning group, who have it's fairly new. So they've just commissioned 10 licenses for our young people to access the Brain in Hand tool. Brain in Hand, for those of you that don't know, is a professional digital support system which helps people with making decisions, managing anxiety and dealing with unexpected situations. It's not condition specific, but it is often used by people who are autistic, who have learning difficulties, or who are managing their mental health challenges. What we have done is already identified a number of young people where Brain in Hand would support with appropriate behaviour management, help regulate some of these young people's emotions, as well as help process thoughts in a calm, reflective way. What the app does is it also supports de-escalation and limits and reduces physical signs of distress or when overwhelmed. And these can be things like involuntary twitching, fidgeting, reducing increased tone, calming agitated behaviour, and even in some cases isolation. This is all done through working with the young people and their families and recognising the strategies and interventions that work specifically for them. And those are then populated into the app. But you are allocated a member of staff who supports you fully in the setup and management. But it's a great way of using a digital tool that enables independence around prompting, instructing a young person, say, for example, even to take rest breaks, support with organising themselves, time management, and even help with scheduling their days, the weeks or months ahead. Next, that's it. Next slide, please. So I'm leaving my details here, so I'm more than happy to share any information that we've put together. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. So if there's any information, or you just want to chat about what we're doing in Wakefield, I'm more than happy for you to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sammy. That's a really fantastic kind of overview of what's clearly a huge amount of work in, from what you've said, quite a short period of time. Since you've been at Wakefield, actually. One question that I had, which I think might be useful to share, is actually your role, what your role is at Wakefield and how that's a new role. It might be useful for people. And then we've got a couple of other questions in the chat.
Yeah, so as the supported internship and preparing for adulthood coordinator, I kind of support our SENAT team, so our special educational needs and review team, with with a number of different complex cases, a support with mediations and tribunals, but it's also about strategic planning and actually setting up services for any young person from year 9 onwards. So I have a physical presence in schools, and I support the SENCOs in leading and chairing the year 9 transitional reviews, and support families at the same time in looking at what services we can offer. And if young people are genuinely struggling with the classroom-based learning, it's about thinking creatively and actually looking at what opportunities we can kind of create to make sure that these young people can continue to develop their skills and either move into further education or also actually continuing education as long as it's the right pathway for them. But I do link in with all the different stakeholders, and it's about finding out what services are available. There's some fantastic and amazing training providers, and it's just linking in with them to make sure that I know who they are and how they can help, and it's about working together. It's about co-production and working in partnership, because we've all got it's the young people's best interests at heart.
Thanks, Sammy. There is a question in the chat about the HR work that you mentioned at the beginning and whether or not there was any resistance to ring fencing.
Not necessarily. What I did was actually I went to the DMTs and actually provided them lots of information about what the key issues are with our young people. And
what are the DMTs? Sorry, just to clarify.
It's the directors and the directorate management teams within the council. So I went right to the top and I actually provided evidence on what our key issues are, and how innovation needs to be kind of implemented, and our SEND young people would end up, it's crisis prevention. So at the end of the day, we don't want any young people need, although obviously there are, but it's about making sure that you go to the right people. So they then instruct HR. They instructed HR and actually supported what we were planning to do, and HR were kind of when they're instructed by the top, they don't necessarily argue or resist. So I suppose it's who you go to.
I like your style a lot. I know in our conversations you've spoken about going right in there at the procurement meetings.
Procurement and commissioning meetings,
yeah, and really making a difference by just clarifying exactly what it is in terms of those shared outcomes that we should all be aiming for. And I'd just like to let you know that in the chat we've got a question about whether other local authorities have the same facilities, and we've also got people from Calderdale saying we miss you.
Oh, that's nice. I miss you too.
But thanks very much, Sammy. I'm going to sort of round that off now, although I know you're going into a breakout room as well as everyone else. So what I'd like to do now, if I may, is ask Rebecca perhaps to put the 2 questions that we've got for the groups to discuss in the chat. What we wanted to do is, having listened to those presentations and sort of had an opportunity to actually network. So we're going to break into groups and look at to what extent young people with SEND are able to access supported employment in your area. That's a key question, we'd like you to discuss. And we'd also like you to share in that discussion what's needed to progress the work further. And you've had lots of ideas from those presentations, and I know many of you are already doing some fantastic work.
So we're going to now just have a very quick bit of feedback from each of the groups. So I'm going to start off with asking Ellen if you could come up with 2 key messages for us, please. I think Ellen's got frozen too.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Alice. Did you have a group?
Yes, I've got feedback.
Okay, would you like to start then?
Yeah, really good discussion, and thankfully enough time to have a good discussion. So thanks for my group, group 3 for that. So we heard about Care Plus Employability, a social enterprise in Yarborough. We spoke about the issues in North East Lincolnshire. Employer engagement is an overriding issue for everybody. And, you know, opportunities like Kickstart are great, but it's finding our way and making sure that these opportunities are well known about by everybody. We had several colleagues from the DWP in the group, which was great. And Abdul from Birmingham, who works now as a school advisor for DWP, was able to give us some news about the work he's done with schools to do presentations on what's available at the job centre, and just really getting that word out there. Interesting feedback around there being more ambition to go into employment amongst young people, but at the same time, in particular since COVID, a real issue around motivational anxiety and young people perhaps not turning up to things. And some real kind of issues around engagement for challenges to face. And a colleague from Nottingham, Nathan, talking about gaming and arts. And, you know, if we're all facing these changes in employer engagement, you know, actually what's going on in terms of new types of engagement, employment around arts and gaming, what's the potential there? Scott, who joined us as well from Lincolnshire, spoke about the need for schools to start early, and gave a good example of work with schools to really encourage them to think about PfA from the earliest years and look at other areas for examples. And I particularly liked his reference to encouraging them to have a bit of sort of healthy competition. So where it's gone well in one school, you know, actually looking to each other to be inspired. And my colleague in Hereford, Alexia, was speaking about just that rise in youth unemployment, how big it's been, and lack of large businesses. So micro businesses, lots of micro businesses sometimes are quite good because of a family feel, but actually quite high risk for them perhaps to take on new interns or apprentices. Thank you. I think that summarises the key issues. I've made lots of notes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Ellen, I'm hoping you are one such person back in the call and able to hear us and able to feed back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yay. Okay. Like Alice, had a good discussion with the group, and it was good to hear about some really excellent opportunities that are still happening, even in spite of COVID. But a couple of things that came up that were challenges really. One of them is at the minute for young people who are wheelchair users, and there not being enough space for them to socially distance, and also the issue around things like hoists and personal care makes it tricky for those young people to access supported internships in an open labour market. The other thing that came up was the challenge around not having supported employment agencies available right across the country, and where they are, that's seen as being a real bonus to supporting young people to get them into jobs, and having job coaches available through those supported employment services like Wakefield and Lincolnshire described. And also the other thing about bringing what's needed to progress the work is really bringing employers together through employment forums. And also understanding how job coaches can be accessed through access to work when the supported employment service perhaps, or the job coach is no longer available through the supported internship. So when a young person goes into the workplace and the job coach can't follow them, how can that be funded? Can access to work come up with a solution there? I think that's enough.
Okay, let's move on to Sammy.
Yep. So our group, I mean, COVID has definitely had a huge impact on you know, the opportunities available for everyone. But we spoke about, I mean, Sarah's from Bradford. She's from the project search team in Bradford. Their work obviously completely came to a stop because of COVID. Both Next and the hospital were unable to offer the work experience and placements within their setting. So what they did was actually transition the students within Bradford College, which is absolutely amazing. So they had opportunities within catering, worked in the library. They adapted what they would have done for those students. Obviously, reasonable adjustments were placed, and the young people obviously had those internal work experience and placement opportunities. Craig from Sheffield also provided a really good example of virtual work experience that they've been offering and will continue to after after COVID, and that was researching famous buildings across the world and obviously having those virtual sessions with a corporate company. Again, we had loads of really good examples of work experience and placements, placements continuing over, in gardening in the local community, outside rather than obviously internal placements that would have been generic and offered. But there were issues. The issues were kind of 1, COVID, and 2, looking at PfA curriculums. Many of us did actually think that it was really worthwhile looking at the curriculum being transformed into 2 pathways, and one of them to be definitely led via PfA. So yeah, one of the other things that we spoke about was the fact that it's really important to have pre-employability courses prior to the internship courses that are being offered, simply because some of those young people aren't ready and we would be setting them up to fail. So it's important that they do develop some of the key skills needed and have an eligibility criteria as well for the internship cohort, so that they can be successful in applying for jobs and succeeding at some kind of substantive work following the programme.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can feedback a bit from the main room.
Yes, thank you. That would be helpful.
Yeah, so we had a select group, but we were all right. There's a few of us. There's lots of interesting stuff going on. There's Cornership Employers Project, Cornerstone Employers Project, Project Search, internship forums that happen regularly. And Derby College spoke a bit about their work skills that they're doing with their pupils to prepare them for lots of different things like interviews, but also to recognise and be confident to ask for adjustments. And that was something that came up a few times as well. We briefly discussed COVID's impact, but it was interesting. Derby College found that where placements couldn't happen, young people were able to shadow their parents at home, even supporting them with things like Teams because they'd been used to using it for lessons at that point. So there were some shadowing opportunities that they were able to sort of make the most of during that. Juliet and Rachel from Sandwell hadn't met before, so they've been linked up today. They had some ideas around councils and services around SEND boards. So health, social care, parent carer forums, practicing what they preach and having all of those teams offering internships. That's something that they could do going forward. And as well as networks and partnerships, building on those so that you can facilitate introductions and celebrate and showcase success.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it's just the group that I was with. Okay, so I was very pleased we were very pleased to start off by having some very positive feelings really coming from Shropshire, that there seemed to be more willingness to offer very bespoke packages for people, 5-day a week, 2 days education, 3 days in with funded by adult social care. all the learning taking place in the workplace, those kind of things. So that sounded really positive. And quite a few other people felt that things actually there was more of a commitment to helping people into work. Possibly the COVID has alerted us to the fact that young people in general are, you know, having so many difficulties getting into employment. So Sheffield was one of those places too. We had, obviously, like other groups, we heard about the impact of COVID and the difficulty for some people who had hitherto kind of been doing really well, and opportunities not being available and them sort of struggling to move on to the next step. We had a bit of a discussion about brain in hand, and Hayden talked from South Staffs College, talked about how they'd managed to do it on an individualised basis with support from DWP, presumably access to work, and the positive benefits of that. And also we talked a bit about working with families, the importance of working with families, and I know other groups did as well, and about broadening horizons, helping people to think about things beyond just education, and put the next step automatically being university. And if it wasn't going to be university, you know, what do you do? That's sort of the horrors of, you know, the adult world, really. So I think we didn't really get onto the question about how to progress things, but I think there were some positive stories, and we very helpfully had Teresa in the group from DWP offering to provide some help with access to work, and I think she's already put in the chat that she'd be willing to have individual examples and people contact her to see if we can iron out some of the difficulties that people are experiencing. So it was a good discussion. We were quite wide ranging, I think it's fair to say. So thank you.
I think one of the biggest things that came out of the group and what's coming out today has been the fact that local authorities are being creative about how they offer internships, and we're seeing that shift in a way that we hadn't done before COVID, which is excellent. And I feel we've really got a momentum behind us now around looking at the opportunities that can be looked for outside things like the health service, and looking at other employers, and recognising that schools and colleges and local authorities are also employers, and that was something that I think we can take away from today, definitely.
Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, we're going into a short presentation from Carol on vocational profiling, thanks to Rebecca. Bit of a hitch on getting those slides up.
Yep. Okay, so this is really just a recap on what Ellen was saying at the beginning, really. And so I'm not going to dwell on this, but obviously one of the key components, and you'll see in that list, is vocational profiling, because what we know that what works is actually taking a really person-centered approach to helping people who've got additional needs to get into work, so that we're not slotting people into any old opportunity that comes up. And this did occur to me very recently. I've got a young man who I'm in touch with, and I realised that although he's working with somebody else, I don't think I've ever seen a vocational profile for him. So that's something to get onto, because otherwise you do end up kind of just looking for things that you think somebody could do, and they're probably of no interest. So you're really wasting your time if you don't do this vocational profiling work. So Rebecca, can we go on to the next slide, which is what is a vocational profile?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. So the vocational profile is a person-centered planning tool that's specifically geared to employment, and it's used to inform the direction of travel on the journey into work. And it's the tool that gathers information that will determine what's going to be suitable in the way of work tasters, work experience, vocational courses that somebody might pursue, and any jobs that might be there for that individual. And it provides an overview of the person's aspirations and interests, experience and needs that can be summarised and attached to a plan. And if somebody's got an education, health and care plan, we advise that you can have a summary attached to that, but they might have another kind of plan that isn't an education, health and care plan, and it might well be that you want to attach it to that as well, so that people have got employment in mind when they're thinking about that individual. And also it's something that the young person can share with their parents, and they could share with, you know, family and friends, and it might spark opportunities as well because of that. Thank you. Next slide, please, Rebecca. Okay, so it's the thing to differentiate it is that it is very much a tool for that kind of gathering information. It's a discovery tool. So it's not a tool that somebody would fill in on their own. It's much better done as a conversation. And it's not a CV at the end of the day. We're not producing something that you would then hand to an employer as a way of profiling an individual. It's not something that's supposed to just be done once and then sits on a shelf. The idea is that every time that somebody does some work experience, and possibly they discount a job, or something crops up, or something really triggers, you know, an interest in them, that gets added to the vocational profile. So it's continually being updated. So it's a live document. And it's also not a way of assessing that somebody's not ready for work. It's not about that. It's about actually looking for the best possible match for an individual. Next slide, please. So ideally, a vocational profile would be completed by someone who has a good relationship with the young person, and it should be somebody who's going to help support them on their journey into work. As I said, it should be done as a conversation with a young person, and they can be used anytime from year 8. We are aware of some schools that are using it from year 8. More commonly, it would be year 9, but the earlier the better in a way, because it helps you to think about things that might be good to include in the curriculum for that individual as well. And it is an opportunity to raise aspirations, because sometimes people have got very little confidence, their family's got very little confidence, they've only been told negative things, and it's a way of enabling you to think about, well, okay, they're interested in that particular activity or that particular kind of work, but that would be a difficult thing to do. So what is it about that type of job that really interests them, and are there similar jobs, or are there things that they could do within that kind of workplace setting that they might be able to try? Thank you, Rebecca. Next one. So this is just a page from the vocational, one of the vocational profiles that you will find on our website. It's the summary sheet, and you can see it basically gathers information that you could easily put into this format. You know, what is it that somebody's positive about in relation to work? What things would they not want in a work setting? You know, are they, what preferred hours might they want to work? You know, days of the week. You know, and that could include Saturdays and Sundays. And I think we need to just be aware that we don't want you know, a magnum opus probably attached to an education, health and care plan. We want something that's really quite succinct, that will just give us the most up-to-date information. So to summarise, a vocational profile is a way of understanding the person in depth, arriving at the best possible work experience or job match, helping people to understand what this person's ideal job would be and what support is needed to make it happen. So you're looking to try and get the best possible job satisfaction at the end of the day. Okay, so these are just my contact details, but also here are some links to the vocational profile podcast that Ellen and I did together, and also the workbook that we've got on there and the tools. So is there any training for vocational profiling, do you know? I think we could probably offer that, whoever MES is, but I'm sorry I can't see your name at the moment, but thank you. I'm going to hand over now to Vicky, and I'm hoping Vicky's on the call. Are you there, Vicky?
I am here.
Fabulous, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I just need to share my slides, so bear with me.
Yeah.
So thanks for having me, everyone, and thank you, Carol, for the lovely introduction. So my name's Vicky O'Connor and I work for the Black Country Consortium, which is the local education partnership in the Black Country. And my role is funded half by them and half by the Careers and Enterprise Company. And I know we've had a few conversations in breakout rooms, and there's been quite a lot of talk about schools need to start earlier with careers provision, and that's exactly what my role is. So I work with 35 special schools in the Black Country. I also work with all the SENCOs in the mainstream schools and the colleges and training providers to ensure that they have a careers programme for all their young people. So I support them to design career programmes, embed LMI into the curriculum that's relevant for their learners, ensure that they are differentiating the careers programme as they would a lesson, embed careers into every lesson and into the curriculum areas, ensure that the schools are making sure their young people have encounters with employers, work experience, either that be external, internal, depending on the young person's needs, or community-based settings, ensuring that they have encounters with a wide variety of educational providers, and that each and every pupil has access to a career guidance interview delivered by a qualified careers advisor at level 6. So just to give you a little bit of background on my role, that's what I do. I meet schools on an individual basis. So sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So as part of meeting the schools, I hold what we call a SEND community of practice meeting. And COVID's been quite good because we've had really high attendance because the schools are able to join online, and we normally do them in the evening. And it's brought all our special schools, mainstream SENCOs together, and our colleges as well under one roof to talk about, you know, the key challenges that these young people are facing that they educate day in, day out. And Carol came along to one of those and spoke about the importance of a vocational profile. So we decided collectively we would design our own Black Country vocational profile. And that's just a draft copy of the front page of it there. So as I've already mentioned, we hold that SEND community of practice. And then we created a working party to devise our own vocational profile. And that working party consisted of head teachers, deputy heads, career leaders from special schools, colleges, mainstream schools, and also from training providers as well. So then we drafted up a mock copy of that, and we sent that out to the 4 local authorities, because within the Black Country we sit under 4 local authorities, for their comments, feedback and suggestions. And we also sent it to a group of employers. So just from an employer's perspective, what would you need to know about that young person? Was it fit for purpose for them? The Department for Work and Pensions locally looked at it, adult services and parent and carer forums as well across the 4 boroughs. Once all those stakeholders looked at that vocational profile, we then gave it to a group of pupils to look at it right from year 9 up into the age of 25, and they looked at the questions, was it fit for purpose, and also the design element of it as well, so before we could send our recommendations to the design company. And I'm just going to briefly go over what we've designed. This is still the draft copy, it's not been signed off yet. So obviously the first page is just those key information, the name of the young person, the parent, the name of the staff member supporting. So schools have agreed that they will start this in year 8. It will be an online editable document that will travel with that young person throughout their whole educational career. And they can edit it and put little notes on with the date that the information's been added. So it will really give a whole picture of that young person and how they've developed over time. So we've got an all about me section with the key information on there. And then again, more about that young person to really do a deep dive with what support they need, what makes them happy, what makes them healthy, how do they feel safe, I mean, I'm not going to read through all these, it's quite hard to see. I'm happy to share the finished product when it's released the end of July with anybody that would like to use it. And then devices that they can use, support needed at college or work. So a lot of our schools and colleges were saying to us they haven't really got a whole picture of a young person as they transition from a special school or a mainstream school to a college, and that would just really aid those smooth transitions for that young person and to ensure that things wasn't repeated and there was progression for them. So as we move through the document, it will talk about work experience that that young person's had and did they enjoy it. So rather than a young person, let's say they had some retail experience at a school and it wasn't for them, they didn't like dealing with the public, rather than that college having to fact find again to find, is that young person okay with the retail? It's already in that document that they've tried that, it wasn't for that young person, let's try something else. So it really brings a whole picture and a really person-centred approach. So TEP talks about here about what support they need as they transition from their school to next step. So that, do they want to have a timetable before they go? Do they want to have a tour? Do they want to have meetings? Do they want to have a map of the building? So it really supports that young people with the transition. And then we move on to that employment side of it and thinking about a career. So what jobs do they already know that their family and friends do? So have that young person come from generation and generation of unemployment, which that was a DWP element, because they said those young people are normally harder to place if they haven't come from a working background. Work experiences, workplace tours, supported internships, and then some examples there of different jobs just for inspiration for them. And then again, support needs, so thinking about when they'd like to work, how they'd like to work, what would suit them, self-employment opportunities as well. And then we're just now in the final feedback stages. So we have drafted everything and that's gone out to everybody that we've mentioned on the first slide. So parents, carers, young people, again, all the schools and colleges, all our employers, Department for Work and Pensions, and they've just been some final amendments which we're just putting through. So we're going to change the font to Comic Sans because it's much more SEND friendly. We're going to ensure the images are more disability confident, maybe with a wheelchair user, just to reflect our audience. There has been some typos and repeats in there, so it's really been important for this consolation part of this, just to make sure that everything's ready and it's looking good. What the following are important to you. Oops, sorry, my slides have gone off. There we go. So we're going to add in keeping fit and healthy option just from some feedback that we've received. And then we had quite a lot of people say there's a question in there. Do you have any behaviours people need to be aware of and what triggers these? And that was quite a question that came up, and a lot of people were like, can we rephrase that? Behaviours, we don't want to be talking about that. So parents especially had an impact on this one. So we're going to change it to something a little bit more easier to read and it doesn't seem like a negative. So like, what sort of things do you find difficult that can upset you and what can we do to help you with that? And then people have mentioned that they would like a communication support document to ensure it's person-centred for those young people that struggle with literacy. And then we're going to add a little bit more to the self-employment and the job section. So, I mean, I did do quite a lot of research to where SEND young people are employed, but some of our autistic parents said we need to include things like IT careers, manufacturing, engineering, games designer. So we're just making sure that we are raising aspirations, including a lot more jobs within that section. And the working days, we're going to include Saturdays and Sundays because that was missed out initially. So I've just started creating like a communication map to ensure this is as person-centred as possible. So obviously it is designed that an adult complete this, somebody that really knows that young person alongside that young person, but obviously we want it to be as person-centred as possible. So I'm just creating just an example on here, just so for those young people that do struggle with communication, that these communication maps can be used to support them along the way. So final feedback was actually due from everyone last night. So further amendments will now be sent to the design company this week and the final copy will be sent to us the middle of July. This will then be sent out to all our schools and colleges and training providers and local authorities to use ready for September. We are also going to trial this with a small number of schools that have come forward. They're going to use it with their learners that do not have an EHCP and are just on the SEND register. So we're having 4 mainstream schools pilot that to see what impact that has before we roll it out. As you know, we would like you to use this with EHCP learners, but also with every young person that has a special educational need. Obviously, we've designed this to improve employment outcomes, but really from the schools and colleges point of view, they wanted it to aid transitions, so they can use the same editable online document in the Black Country to ensure consistency. And then colleges can have that document during consolations to aid the smoother transition to colleges and next step providers. And it will really build up a bigger picture over time, and hopefully as we continue to use it, improve the possibility and probability of paid work. Thank you. Has anyone got any questions?
Thank you, Vicky. Yes, there are a few questions in the chat, I believe.
Let me see.
Whoops. Various really positive comments about it. Bev asked the question, who will oversee it?
So it will be down to the individual schools and colleges. So obviously, as you're probably aware, each school and college is set up very differently. So some of the schools, it will be the SENCO that does it if it's a small special school. Some of the schools that have like mentors or TAs, so they'll be responsible, or tutors. So it's going to be a very different setup in every school.
Right, thank you. So, and presumably the CEC will continue to be working with them, so it doesn't just slip off the agenda. Is that the idea?
Hopefully funding continues.
Yeah, great, thank you. So comment from Natalie, we use what my employer needs to know about me to keep me safe. Okay, and I mean, there will be a whole range of things out there. There are various people asking if it could be shared. Ellen saying 1-page profile is a good way to share relevant information with an employer. And we've got an example of that, haven't we, on our website, Ellen?
We do, and we've used it for Georgie, who was supported into employment last year, and it was a way of her employers understanding exactly what you said, Vicky, about how best to support her if there was something that might upset her, and what Tracy was saying earlier about the young woman that she supported into employment and the things that need to be taken into consideration if changing a routine, etc. And that's on the 1-page profile. So it's an important document, really, whatever you call it.
So Adele's asking you, Vicky, was this led by the local authority? It wasn't, was it?
No, I kind of led it to the local authorities, and obviously there's 4 local authorities within the Black Country, so it has been a case of going back and forward to all 4 of them. They will all have their logos on it, they have all endorsed it, they will all support it. Has been a long process, but we got there in the end.
I think one of the benefits of having a vocational profile is the fact that it can be shared with the next stage. So if a young person's moving from school to college, the college already knows what's happened to them, or for what work experience they've done, etc. So it's a really good way of keeping that continuous journey into employment alive.
Another question for you, Vicky, if that's okay. Sarah's asking, will this include independent schools? I'm not sure whether you've got any independent schools that you've been working with.
So we don't work with any independent schools because our funding won't allow. However, I'm not precious over anything that I create because I'm in this role to support all young people. Sarah, if you want to drop me an email once it's complete, I'll happily send you the completed document.
Thank you. Okay. Cheryl's saying that they're hoping to do something similar, a rollout in Sheffield. We're delighted as a team, aren't we, Ellen and Alice, because we've been whining on about vocational profiles for a long time. So we're great. It's great that so many people are actually actively working on them. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
And just to say, the one that's on our website, there are a couple of versions actually, but we have seen some really good examples around the country. And I'm thinking of in the east of England, Cambridgeshire has got an interesting vocational profile. But the one that's on our website, please feel free to use, but also adapt the same way as Vicky has done within the Black Country.
Yeah, so another question for you, Vicky. Ruth's asking, do you know if Birmingham CEC are going to mirror this?
I speak to Ruth, who does my role within the Birmingham region. She's more than happy to take our document and use it, but I think we want to kind of pilot it in our area first to see if there's any teething problems and if it need to be amended before we roll it out to other areas.
Okay, thank you. And can it be added to Compass? That's the monitoring system for the Gatsby standards, isn't it?
Yeah, Emma, I don't think we can add it to Compass, but we can add it to the resource directory, so career leaders up and down the country can access it.
Okay, thank you. Vicky, would you share your email, is what they're saying. Is it on your slides? It's on your slides, isn't it?
It's not, but just to make everyone aware, I'm moving house this week. So if you email me, it may be a couple of weeks before I respond because I'm currently sitting surrounded by boxes. I'll put my email in the chat though.
Oh, thank you very much, Vicky. We do appreciate you having come in under such stressful circumstances, because there's nothing like moving home, it feels, to raise the blood pressure level. So thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we're moving on to a question about vocational profiles. So Rebecca, I'm still, for some unknown reason, unable to see people's slides or anything that goes up on the screen. So I do not know what's going on. I might go out and come back in. Ellen, may I hand over to you to ask the question on the Menti if I can't see it?
Of course. I think I can see. So Rebecca's put the Slido code up so that you can answer some of these questions. And really, we want to know if vocational profiles are being embedded in your area. And we'd like you to select all the things that apply to give us some sort of a view of what vocational profiles, the take-up of vocational profiles, and if it is something that's being promoted in schools. So we've asked the questions here, thinking about special schools, are they adopting them? Are all secondary schools being encouraged to use them? Are you adding a summary from a vocational profile to an education, health and care plan? And is anyone ensuring a vocational profile is discussed at an annual review meeting? And then the other one is work experience is being arranged in line with what the vocational profile indicates in at least some schools. Or any other comments that you might want to have or make, please put them in the chat. And Rebecca has put the code that's on the screen, but she's also put the link in the chat. So if we could ask you to answer some of the questions, that would be great.
Yeah, if anyone's not used it before, you can use your phone or go open up a tab in your browser. So you need to go to slido.com and then it will ask you for a code, and that's PfA 22. And yeah, you can go from there. Or the link in the chat will take you directly to it.
Everyone's joining in, which looks great. It's great to see the changes as people are responding.
It's also really useful for us, isn't it, to use this after today in our work and discussions with, strategic leads and government departments as well, just to get a picture of.
I think having a vocational profile is a way of actually understanding how you match people to a job, and it's different to a CV in the sense that, as Carol said, a lot of young people with additional needs may not have that traditional academic route, but actually they could do really good jobs if they're supported in the right way, and a vocational profile gives you the opportunity to think about that. So I think we would love to see it more widely adopted within different settings. And I agree with, someone put something in the chat about starting it from much earlier with children, maybe in primary school, thinking about engaging them in discussions around employment. And that was something we tried to do probably before PfA with a campaign called Aspirations for Life. And that was talking to children as young as 3 and 4 and finding out what it was that they wanted to do when they grew up. And that could be the simple sort of way of using a vocational profile in a primary setting. Okay. So how long are we giving here?
Right, it's dropped off the screen, but it's on 11% for all secondary schools, so being encouraged to use them.
Excellent. So Carol, can you still not see it?
See it. Thank you very much. Yeah, yes. I can. Yeah, I went and came back in, and it all just clicked back into place, which is fabulous. Yeah, so people are still voting, which is great.
And we're hearing some good comments in the chat. We've had something about Camphill and Wakefield. They're using vocational profiles for all students engaging in sustained work placements, and also introducing them at initial meetings with parents and carers, which sounds fantastic. But to date, there's no crossover from schools yet, but hopefully that's in the future. I think that was Ralph. Okay, right.
Somebody's saying they're an interloper, but it's from Lancashire. They're not saying, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay.
Gosh.
Okay, that's great. It's lovely to hear that there's so many places actually using vocational profiles. I think the numbers are still going up, actually. I'm loath to take this down for the moment, but it is really useful for us to see that there's progress being made along these lines.
I think the interesting thing is what we mentioned at the beginning, how we're seeing the shift around discussions about employment and the momentum behind that. You know, we think about what the Department for Education is doing and has done around supported internships in the previous employment grants, and then looking at what the NHS is doing now. It just shows that the messages are getting out there, and that's something I think we can really take away from today and encourage to keep that momentum going.
I know one thing that people have often been surprised by, that you emphasise, Carol and Ellen, in your work, is this opportunity to attach a vocational profile as an appendix to an EHCP. It's interesting that we've got only 19% of people where that's happening, and I think it's possibly just people hadn't realised necessarily that it's something that can be done. So
our summary is a useful thing that Carol showed with the summary document, and if that type of thing could be adopted and attached to an EHCP rather than as Carol said, rather than the whole vocational profile, that summary is really useful.
I think the voting's pretty much stopped, actually, so thank you everybody for that, and I do think that this is very heartening, actually. The progress is really heartening. So thank you very much for those of you who've voted. I know it's not all of you. I'm assuming those of you that haven't are not actually seeing anything about going on around vocational profiles, because we've only got 48 people given a response. So
there's a very good comment from Hayden here, who's saying that as a college, they've adapted a new mantra of careers, not courses, which is fantastic to hear.
Yes, yeah, that is great news. Thank you. Okay, so Rebecca, over to you.
Yeah, so keep the Slido open, and we've got 6 more questions. We'll go through them together, and the next question will appear as I change the slides. So we'll just go to the next one. Okay, so that should appear on your screen. This one isn't a multiple choice. You can put free text, and you can add as many comments. If you put something and think of something else, you can add another one, and we'll leave it live, and we'll see the responses come up on the screen. Give you some time to think about it first.
Okay. And this is really to help us build on the discussions we had in our breakout groups.
I've just spotted a typo in there, actually. What do you perceive to be the main challenges in providing good employment support in your area? It should be, should it?
Yeah.
You can respond to this question more than once.
Do you know, Alice, I read that and didn't even see it. Well done.
Well, it's just you might wonder what area, you know, like a region or a...
Okay, that's an interesting one. No financial incentive for employers to offer supported internships. We come across this quite a lot, but actually because a supported internship is a college course and unpaid, employers are actually getting free labour and someone sort of almost like a try before you buy situation. So I'm not sure having a financial incentive is maybe the best way to go.
No, I don't know that it would have come up so much if it hadn't been for the fact that Kickstart's around and employers are getting the wages paid for those people who are with them for 6 months. So that's free labour, completely free labour for that as well. But and I think it's probably somehow kind of shifted people's thinking, the employers' thinking as well. So it's I think it probably Kickstart isn't helpful to this group. Yeah. Ruth is saying, oh, is it Ellen? Is it? Oh, I just feel the apprenticeships and Kickstart. I can't read the rest of it.
Is that for me, Eileen?
Stealing our thunder. Oh yeah, I think that the apprenticeships and Kickstart programs are stealing our thunder, said Ruth. Yeah,
I would agree, Ruth. I think it's making it very difficult. But Kickstart actually isn't necessarily going to help people get into jobs because they're in the Kickstart program for 6 months and then they move on to something else, and the employer has to take on a new Kickstart person. And so what happens then? Do they go on to an apprenticeship where they earn less as an apprentice than they would on the Kickstart program? So if any colleagues from DWP can perhaps share any other information or anything that perhaps might help, that would be great.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, there are some of the things that we would expect. The extremely competitive job market at the moment, particularly for certain sectors like creative industries. Yeah. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for that world, because a lot of people have kind of been doing that sort of stuff as a leisure activity. They're designing stuff online and so on, and gaming a lot, and there is a real interest in opportunities there, but actually there aren't that many employers in that field either at the same time at the moment.
It's to maybe look at where employment is still happening. With our employment conferences we did at the back of last year and the beginning of this year, we heard from employers who were still recruiting through the pandemic, and a lot of those were the distribution and logistics companies like DPD. And I know there's some inroads with Amazon at the minute, which hasn't happened yet, but who knows? We may see them changing their approach too. And then we're looking at things like nursing homes and daycare and day nurseries, and then we're hearing about local authorities opening up opportunities. So it is still difficult, and we will see a reduction in opportunities in many sectors, as you say, Carol.
Yeah, there's a question here, and I guess this is for DWP people as well. Has anyone done any analysis around accessibility for young people with SEND and Kickstart, particularly thinking of young people who may be in semi or independent living, and affordability or benefit implications of full-time working? Well, the benefit implications of full-time working, there's a lot of stuff around that, and universal credit's actually a helpful thing in that regard because it's a tapering arrangement, so people keep more of their money than they would have done in the past. But the issue about Kickstart is a bit different in the sense that one of the eligibility criteria is that you have to be on universal credit, and many young people in the group that we're talking about aren't on universal credit, and so they're not eligible in the first instance. And
it's with the supported internships, of course, that they're unpaid, and that's what, like we say, it's a real disincentive for employers to have those over Kickstart. Yeah.
Okay, so funding issues for dedicated staff such as job coaches, information, advice and guidance staff. The job coaching thing is about that business about what status do job coaches have, and is it really a profession? And in some places they're self-employed, sometimes they're employed. It's a real mix of arrangements around job coaches.
I think in some areas where the job coaches are linked to colleges, they're employed by the college, but then the in-work support is paid for through Access to Work. So and that's sometimes an issue because of the application process still being paper driven. So there's still some teething problems around job coaches and how they are employed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fixed term is short term. Rebecca, there was a comment. Can you scroll back up? There was a comment just a little bit before. Continued comment. That was the one from today's meeting. The proven model of supported employment based on IPS, the individual place and sustain model, the place, train and fade model for adults needs to be developed further in PfA. Definitely, the understanding of that supporting someone into employment and not over supporting them, and understanding that fading is a very strong a strong part of supported employment. So a person will do the job and then you'll gradually fade away, allowing them to become more confident and competent in what they do. So that place, train and fade model, or IPS, is the other term for it. Definitely is the way to go.
Yeah, IPS tends to be used in the mental health world, supported employment more in the learning disability world. So
the IPS model is to maintain people.
Very similar.
Yeah, rather than supporting them into it initially. But yeah, it's definitely that support is crucial.
I think that the thing about the employers understanding that the job coach isn't there for all time is important, and understanding that at the moment we're in unusual circumstances, aren't we, with COVID and social distancing and so on, and job coaches in a way add to the numbers all the time, and there is just a logistical issue sometimes related to that, but having a clear message about what a job coach does and will do, and that they can be there for the employer as well, I think is a really important part of that. So yeah, we need to get our story right, don't we, when we're approaching employers? Yeah,
I think it's when a job coach is seen as a disability expert, and employers are worried if that person comes away from the workplace. So that's where the mentor or in-work person as part of the organisation is very useful as well. But it's not about that person training the individual to do the job. That is definitely the job coach's role. There's a question about travel in the chat, and access to work can be used for travel if someone can't do independent travel. So it's understanding what access to work can pay for. So maybe, and our DWP colleague has actually put that in the chat response.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, I think we've stopped picking up responses here. Am I right? And it doesn't seem to moved up from there for a while, I don't think. So shall we just go on to the next one, which I think is a multiple choice, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very good having access to work colleagues or DWP colleagues in the meeting to come up with some of the answers. It's excellent. It all looked very positive initially.
Yeah. Well, if you're in a position to influence this and you don't know, or you think the answer is no, perhaps it's something to get on and address, really, because it does make a difference to whether or not people will then put the right elements in place to enable that pathway to work effectively. So
I think having something about employment and employment pathway and what's available locally to support people into employment, whether it's part of a college offer or whether it's part of the local authority offer, really encourages parents to think differently and have more aspirations around what's possible for their young person.
Can I just ask, because I know both yourself, Ellen, and Carol, having done this work for some time at the PfA team, we've got a sense of which local areas do have very good employment pathways in their local offers. Is that something you could just mention a couple that you know of off the top of your head? I'm sure it wouldn't be comprehensive, but it's quite useful for people.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Wolverhampton's one.
Yes.
Somerset's another. Newcastle's another. Ellen, do you want to say some from your regions?
Hertfordshire, Essex. I think we're seeing really excellent develops in Nottinghamshire, where they're doing training for job coaches, etc., within colleges and trying to involve schools too. Lincolnshire, of course, there's a good employment offer. And then we've heard about Wakefield as well. So
Bristol's got
Bristol.
a clear, although I say clear, I think it has got an employment pathway, but it has so many strands within it that I think it can appear slightly complex. But I haven't seen their new website, so I may be being a little unfair there, because there's a really comprehensive programme of work to support people into employment.
Yeah. And of course, there's information where there are project search sites. There'll be information about project search being available in various areas. But again, it's about making sure we have as many opportunities as possible available for young people to access for an employment pathway. Okay. So is that everyone?
Okay. Right.
Next one.
Let's move on to the next one. Yes.
We've got about 3 more questions, haven't we?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is an interesting one, because the recent research has shown that actually the job coach is crucial to creating that sustainability in employment. If they're trained properly and they support the person in the right way, doing the place, train and fade approach means that job is usually sustained beyond sort of just a couple of months. And there is, and Carol mentioned as well about where job coaches fit in the professional side of things. There is a job coach or a supported employment certificate that can be done through BASE. It's, if you wanted to have details of that, it's on the BASE website. And also any other training that job coaches need would be on the BASE website too. I think Natalie has asked, when it refers to trained, does it mean TSI trained exclusively? It means both, I think, Natalie. So TSI is as part of the training, and then other sort of more rounded employment training around supported employment that the certificate in supported employment would offer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was just really following on from conversations that we have in the TSI. National network, and yeah, that's why I put a smiley face. But yeah, obviously people do need to know the full supported employment model as well. But yeah, thank you.
Okay.
It's good to see that we've got lots of trained job coaches. It's one of the things that we're doing through PfA is we're creating job coach forums as well around the regions. So there's one in the East Midlands and one in the East of England, and I think, Carol, you've got one in the Southwest, is that right?
It's not specifically job coaching, but although the employment forum meetings, particularly last year, were very geared to job coaching because of the COVID situation, the need to adapt what people were doing, and we did spent a lot of time talking about how people are working online and access to workplaces, and how keeping young people motivated, etc. So it's not a job coach network specifically, but there are a lot of people who come who are job coaches. Yeah.
So the reason a couple of areas have got them already is because they've had an increase in job coaches, and they wanted to come together to talk about the challenges and the issues that they're finding, especially at the minute, and workplace analysis and things around jobs. I just want to clarify something that Natalie said. Cheryl has asked if there's a TSI network. It's actually a network that we belong to, which is about TSI trainers who deliver TSI training. So sorry if that got your hopes up, Cheryl. There isn't a national TSI network, but there could be a job coach in a job coach forum in your area for job coaches who are trained to deliver good support. Which area are you in, Cheryl? Do you mind me asking? Thanks. Okay. So Alice, that's for you.
Great.
Just to say that people who deliver training and systematic instruction, you'll find the list of them on the base website. And I'm not sure, Rebecca, if Rempler is still delivering TSI, because since they changed their whole setup. But there are definitely trainers listed on the base website.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. This is an interesting one because it links very much to the vocational profile and whether that's being used to help plan for employment.
Mm-hmm. Ellen, we do have work experience targets as EHC, but they're not necessarily work experience targets. Some of them are just like the preparing for work experience. So doing maybe some projects or just going out for work with work experience team for that. Does that make sense? Rather than a work experience element, they might not be ready for that, but they might be ready for doing some of that PfA stuff in beforehand, travel training, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah.
So they are in there, but they're not necessarily just employment based.
So when it gets to maybe a young person who's 16 or 17, would work experience be part of that, or employment be part of their EHCP then?
So when they're 16 17, it depends on the individual. Some of them come and are work experience ready, so they're ready to go out and work experience. Some of them come with us and they've got some additional needs that need to be supported first, so we'll work around so they'll have work experience based targets to progress on to work experience, but it might be that they'll do group projects because we need to identify the behaviours, triggers, emotional responses and stuff before we put them in a smaller environment.
Okay.
In safer settings first.
I think the main thing is that you're thinking about it and it's a bespoke approach to the individual.
Yeah, it's definitely there.
And then as soon as they're you're identifying the workplace as long as that's part of it, I think that's the main thing to think about.
Definitely.
Okay, I don't think we're picking up any new ones, are we? But that's good. That's interesting. Oh, we are. That's interesting that 60% at the moment are saying yes, and 19% saying they don't know. So not sure. We would expect to see employment in there. The preparing for, chapter 8 of the Code of Practice does talk about preparing for adulthood from an early age, and you would expect, if you're going to be focused on the things that it says in chapter 8, that you would have them reflected in the education, health and care plan, and not just focused on needs. So it's something perhaps you could again go back to base and ask about, because we would expect to see that, and also it does help in terms of people remembering to talk about employment.
Yeah, and a couple of comments in
review.
A couple of comments in the chat, Carol, have been that employment outcomes tend to be very generic, like get a paid job. And Scott, who's from Links, again said employment outcomes are not consistent across the board. So I think we have to start that discussion from much earlier and encourage it within schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and also something like employment outcomes, like get a paid job. I mean, if that's somebody's aspiration to work, that should be in the aspirations section. And I mean, it might be you don't know what they want to do, but you would expect to see something about the different sectors that they're interested in.
And look at the steps along the way for whatever it is they're interested in. And again, with vocational profile can be really useful in identifying some of the things that they like to do and then starting to explore how that links to the world of work.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a definite COVID specific one there. And thinking about sort of what's happening in your area to address the needs of young people post 16.
As I remember, we wrote this question with lots of different contexts in mind around recovery plans, educational, mental health plans around recovery post-COVID, and actually just getting a sense of how much employment for young people with SEND and colleagues in the room are involved in recovery plans for this group of young people is going to be particularly interesting, I think, for us.
I think the anxiety side, Alice, is what we were talking about, wasn't it, about how anxious young people are about going back into the workplace. I think Tracy touched on it too, and the mental health side, as you mentioned.
And any examples, if people in responding to this question in the chat could give any examples of the recovery plans that they've been involved with, whether they're, you know, local area ones, or whether they're very specific to a particular area of work in the local area, like a transition plan around mental health. That would be very useful, I think, for us at this point, while we're really trying to encourage local areas to look at recovery and build this into the agenda. It looks like a lot of people aren't sure, which is exactly the impression that we've had to date around not being sure. So those of you who've replied yes, it'd be great if you could give examples.
Oh. If you don't want to speak, it's fine to put something in the chat or contact us later. That might be useful as well. Our details were put into the chat earlier for the different regions, but you can find us on our website too.
So I think we stopped having people. Oh, there's a huge example there.
Oh, it's about RAPA, brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think that's the RAPA process is so recording and recognising and recording progress is without qualifications is definitely a really good way of working with young people who perhaps have more complex needs as well. So if you can show that progress on their education, health and care plan, it really makes a difference. I'm just trying to read this as I'm talking. Excellent, Hayden, thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Oh, so Alice, did you see that from Karen about they're doing training in mental health first aid?
Yeah, yeah.
COVID recovery, which I think is great.
Yeah, so we've got the rollout of the designated mental health leads in education starting in September, where all education settings will be given a list by the DFE of sort of quality assured mental health training, and mental health first aid is a very popular course. But there is quite a lot out there, so I think there's a comprehensive attempt to bring that information together for people working in education. My interest is also in those working in all the other areas that are key for these young people, both in terms of mental health, but also in terms of, you know, employment and recovery plans.
Okay.
Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Yeah, last one.
And could you put the evaluation tool into the chat at this stage, Rebecca, a few times, and then we can make sure we catch people if they have to leave early.
A couple of people have, sadly, but we can always, I'm sure we'll get some feedback in there.
You mean the form?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A link to the form, thank you. Oh, thanks, Angela.
So this might be, there might be things like schools have got sort of posters up on the walls, they've got inspirational speakers, they're encouraging children to try different roles, you know, all those sorts of things really, anything that you're aware of.
And thinking about maybe how careers enterprise advisors go into schools, or the DWP schools advisors, you know, are people linked into them? Excellent. Yeah. It's encouraging.
If anybody's aware of a primary school that's doing something really good around helping children to understand, you know, and careers and stuff, I'd be really, really interested to know if there's anybody out there that's doing some excellent stuff around, you know, ordinary lives and helping people to be aspirational. That'd be fabulous to know. I'm keen to hear about that.
And can I add early years settings as well?
I just think
we're not demanding at all, are we?
Yeah, we're really going to milk you now at the end of this session for everything you know.
We're all exhausted and we're just, you know, layering on the questions.
Just thinking of the same thing. Sorry, Carol. Just thinking about Senko networks there, it's really good to hear what they're doing, and it's something we can support within our regional role.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one, that work's being done in schools, but it's not reflected in the Education, Health and Care Plan when they move on. So there is joining up to be done across early years, primary and secondary, and FE sector. We need to bring people together to all sing from the same hymn sheet, really, don't we? That's good. Yep. Yep, that's another scheme that perhaps could be used more, the National Citizenship Scheme that some local areas are accessing, and I think we need to maybe look at how we can bring them in to link in with our regional networks.
Ray's saying this is not my field of work, but it'd be great to find out if the joint working possible. So yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I've done is actually go to the head meetings, so the primary and secondary heads, and I've spoken at their meetings to discuss PfA and starting really early, and they've acknowledged that and taken on the advice and information, and actually they're starting to implement PfA outcomes early on.
Fantastic. So a couple of schools in one of my areas have come together to bring parents together for a PfA workshop, a sort of coffee morning approach, but virtual, because they want to start parents thinking about preparing for adulthood from much earlier. So I'll let you know how that goes. There you go. Other things happening there. That sounds great.
That's nice to hear. Yeah. Yeah. Fabulous. Okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really lovely stuff here, actually.
Thank you, Lynn.
What we should have done is said, tell us which area you're from as well. because it's really helpful to know.
So we can guess some of them because we've got Bradford College there and
Yeah,
stuff.
no, I didn't, not those ones, but say for
Yeah.
example, we hold dedicated days where we invite people in. I don't know where that's from, but yeah.
Okay.
I'm Nicola from the hearing support team in Leicester. So we have primary days and youth days where we invite our students in, and then we invite adults who are deaf as well, and then they come and talk about their job roles to encourage our students to look at different areas of work.
Excellent. And I know Leicester City is doing some really interesting stuff at the minute with the development of supported internships. So hopefully it's going to be more joined up, Nicola.
Yes, hopefully. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just conscious of time now, everybody. Yep. And it remains really for us to wrap up this session on employment, to say a big thank you to everybody for all the contributions that you've been making us. It's been a really useful event, and actually very exciting to see what a spread of people have been able to attend today. So thank you for that. I mean, I think all of us have felt quite heartened by just how creative that people have been during COVID. And we've seen this commitment. There was generally a sense of commitment to helping young people and providing the support that's required, not just in the room in this conference, but actually a sense that that's something that perhaps COVID has made us more aware of and shone a light on. It's been fantastic to have colleagues from the DWP contributing today, because there's more work to do there. But actually, that's exactly what it is we're going to be doing. We're meeting with them shortly as well. Thank you so much to our speakers. Sammy, thank you for your presentation on the the forums and the work in Wakefield. Tracy, that fabulous case study, and just really bringing some practical examples of what these the journey, if you like, for a young person, that was really useful to hear. And to Vicky as well, despite moving house and being surrounded by boxes, your very thorough journey on the vocational profile, which really inspired so many of us, and we're looking forward to seeing that. So I'm just going to ask Ellen and Carol if they've got any points to add, and please take a moment to fill in that evaluation form before you leave. Ellen.
So just to say that I think coming together like this, it lets us see how much activity there is in each region, and how valuable it is to network and share learning from each area. We do develop lots of resources, but we do that in partnership with the people we work with. And I think that if you want support from us as a team and to come together collectively, please put that in the feedback sheet, and then we can look at other topics and maybe bring people together around the other outcomes and talk about those perhaps going forward in maybe another tri-regional network in the autumn. And I think for me it's been great to hear from so many different people. So thanks everyone. Yeah, well, I just want to reiterate that. So thank you very much to everybody who's contributed, and for everybody who's been so attentive, and thank you to Rebecca also for doing the honours with the technical stuff. And we will make use of the information that you've given us on Slido as well. So thank you for that. And that's it. So cheerio, everybody. Thank you. Bye. Bye.